cable on utility.
Signing up for the job. Reference.
That's right.
Is Tony coming around at all?
I don't know if he is. I mean, I really do this. Just to make it work. If that's okay with you.
Oh, the finance
Yeah,
bubble,
but
this appropriation.
we gotta get that out of here.
Is the finance bubble?
What do you
If they
mean?
pass this one, I think that's good enough.
All right.
Yeah, that's good enough. She just types in these things out. That's good enough. We pass that every year.
Okay.
It's good enough.
But it's gotta go to council.
No, it's tonight. It's on the agenda.
Oh.
It's probably something that,
Pass
it's just
it.
already, some private issue, some private party or something.
Until she comes in, make sure we're ready.
But you need legislation on,
We've got it.
okay.
20,
On the fiber check?
yeah,
You've got that?
yeah. But they're gonna table that
Mr. Mayor, you ready?
tonight.
I'd like to welcome you to the utilities meeting called on November 10th, 2014 at 7 p.m. We'll have a roll call, please. Mr. Goodell. Here. Mr. Bukovac. Here. Mr. Van Turen. Here. Mr. Silk. Here. Mr. Janik. Here. Mr. Winarski.
Here.
And Council President is in attendance as well as administration. We have before us agenda item A1446, request by FiberTech Networks for pole attachments of fiber optics. Before we call Mr. Tim Schultz from FiberTech Networks to speak to us, I'd just like to make sure that everybody has received the map and the contract. Is that correct? And with that, we are, after discussion, we may be considering a table of this item, but we'll leave that up to you guys to decide after the presentation and after discussion, as we got new information today regarding what you received. So with that being said, I'd like to call Mr. Tim Schultz. If you'd go ahead and come up to the podium if you would.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm here with FiberTech's Communications, and basically what we're looking to do is obtain permission to attach to, I've identified approximately 148 Amherst Community telephone poles, and I'm requesting permission to attach to those poles. What this is for fiber optic service, advanced cellular communications. What this would be doing is basically just expanding the coverage area in the city for your cell phone communications. It would improve coverage. As I stated, I've identified approximately 148 poles. This could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less. We have to revisit each and every one and positively identify this Amherst Community. In a lot of places you see that it'll go for Amherst Community to a telephone, CenturyTel, or something like that. So there may be a couple in discrepancy, but that's a pretty close number that we're looking at. Do you have a map of our intended area? Okay, and on that area, we're basically looking to come from the existing cell site location over on North Lake, through the city, from North Lake through the city, past Five Corners here, over by the high school and the middle school, out on Park Avenue to Levitt Road, and there was a couple locations identified there. On our end, when we come in and build these locations, we are responsible for any make-ready issues. Say if there's a spacing issue with an older telephone pole, where we'd either have to replace the pole or move attachments to maintain our PUCO clearance. issues there. So all that would be addressed on our end. And then for each and every pole attachment, we would be paying a yearly fee to the city. Along with that, there are this fiber that we're wanting to run through your city. The final termination point, basically we'd be setting our own telephone pole, and on that telephone pole we would have an antenna on the top of it, a power base, and a radio, and that's what actually does communication for the cell towers. But at current time, we don't have any plans for any commercial customers or outside customers. Basically, this is a dark fiber point-to-point between the cell location and these individual sites. Now, further down the road, we could offer service to commercial-type buildings or the city. We are passing all the city buildings on this planned route here, and down the road we could easily interconnect those buildings if need be. But that's another issue way down the road. But currently I'm just requesting permission to apply to those poles and get our facilities into the city. Do you have? I'll take any questions.
Real quick, I'm going to pass this around. We only have one copy, so I apologize for that, but this was handed to me today. There's a picture. Mr. Schultz provided us two pictures, back to back, of what these 4 poles, is that right, Mr. Schultz? Four poles right now?
That's correct. There's 4 poles in the city, and as of right now, we don't have any intentions for any additional ones. That's the only 4 poles identified that they want to put in the city.
And on the top of those 4 poles, to rid us of dead zones between the towers, are what?
Those are antennas, and that was identified by the cell carrier, dead zones within the city, and that's where we came up with the placement of those telephone poles in the city to better the cell coverage. This is a pretty common thing now. We're building quite a bit, and we're not the only company doing this. Even the cell tower owners, they're building a lot of locations similar to this and all over the country. As FiberTech, we're in 11 states doing these, as well as commercial installs and school-type districts, that kind of thing.
Yes, we'll go ahead and take questions if you would, and I appreciate your willingness to.
Absolutely, thank you.
Ms. Wasil?
Yes. Mr. Mayor or Mr. Safety Services Director, there was mention at the beginning of the meeting that you might want to have this tabled. Could you explain that?
Well, some questions came up in the previous meeting before this meeting. Go with Joe, was there some questions came up that they wanted answered, and Joe might go into those, and what some of the questions you had that you felt maybe have to be required before passage, which is up to council, of course, if they're not comfortable. I want to make sure they understand all the options are going to happen, and I want to make sure you're aware of everything they're going to do, so after they're done with their project, you don't say, well, you didn't tell us they were going to do that. So I want to make sure if there's any issues on the floor right now, that you answer all the questions that they have, and there's no surprises at the end of the project.
Mr.
Yeah, I just got some of the new information I saw. I didn't realize there was some other thing, these repeating towers at the top of some of these poles. They want to hook up to electricity, wire meters. I just want to make sure and go over this a little more with our electric supervisor before I'm comfortable, especially passing something like this on the emergency.
Well, maybe what we can do, Mr. Chairman, you may want to consider that we take this to the floor of council, but we not suspend rules until the second reading, which we can do. And that way we'll get it on the floor of council. It doesn't have to come back to committee. And then we'll get the answers to the questions. And if the answers aren't satisfactory, we can send it back to committee.
And I appreciate that consideration, that emergency was just for immediate signing, and that doesn't have to be on there as well. Our mayor has stated that if we pass it I believe with an emergency, it just means that he'll sign it the next day and allow these guys to get on the polls and get this done.
Right.
But it's up to us.
Yeah, but we can suspend rules on the second
Absolutely.
reading also, and have it on the emergency then too. And now, because I think that it sounds like you do have some pretty good questions that we need to have answered before we actually adopt the legislation, but this will allow it not to interfere if it turns out the questions are answered legitimately.
Just to clarify, there's no request right now for us to skip 3 readings on this. This is just with emergency. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
No, what we did was we put the emergency clause on it, which means as soon as I sign it, whether it's you suspend council rules and pass it, or it's 2 weeks from now, or 2 weeks, but as soon as I sign it, once you say it's passed, then it becomes law immediately. You don't have to wait the 30 days. So that just eliminates the 30 days, regardless of what reading you pass it on.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I believe we can either send it on to the council floor and do 3 readings or whatever you guys decide to do. But,
This is,
Mr. President?
this legislation that you have before you is strictly letting him come into the city and run his fiber optics on our poles. That's all we're addressing right now. The 4 additional poles he wants to put up are antenna poles to pick up dead spots within the city, if so happens. But all we're considering now is putting the fiber optic on the poles. We haven't talked to our electric department to see if it's going to interfere with anything, which is what we have to do yet. And that's all we're considering. Now, there's a lot of options we can have further on down the line with connecting buildings up and so forth, which we haven't gotten into. But right now, all we're considering is for him to run the fiber optics in the city. Basically, that's it.
Okay, but with that, I move that we take it to the floor of council.
As I say, we just had another question, but if you want to second that for further discussion.
Yeah, I'll second that, that's fine.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilwoman Wasilk and a second by Goodell to take this to the floor of council with the emergency clause. And we'll have discussion, continuous discussion, and if you can direct those towards Mr. Schultz would be even better.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. Whose idea was this to find the dead spots and put these?
Oh, that was the cell carrier. They identified the dead spots within the city, and then they approached us, and that's where we got contracted to build the location out. So basically, that was identified by them.
Oh, that's good, nice. Nice to know that they actually do something with our money.
Yeah.
The other question I had was, with this legislation that's before us as it's written, what is that going to cost the city? Is it going to cost us anything for you to put your?
Oh, absolutely not. That's not going to cost the city anything. Again, any make-ready issues, any pole issues, that'll be addressed by our company. The city does gain pole attachment fees for each and every location, and then the pole meter fees for the final pole set, the antenna poles. So you guys would get power, all that would be paid, and any kind of associated licensing fees that would go with it, that would be paid by us as well.
All right, so, and you had mentioned that if you have to install a pole for whatever reason, that would be on your cost?
Yes, we assume all those costs. We put the pole in, we do any kind of maintenance, and say there is a car pole accident, something like that, we're made aware of that immediately by the status monitoring of that cell tower.
And you guys maintain that.
And we roll on it and make any kind of repairs needed.
That's all I have, thank you.
Great, thanks.
I think we'll have Mr. Booth back then, Mr. Ventura.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Schultz, for coming in. On this map, where there's some white pins, or I'm sorry, white, I'm almost colorblind, yellow pins that are on the map, are those signifying where you want to put the antennas?
Those are the locations for the antennas. There's one identified on Levitt Road, north of Middle Ridge right there. It says North X3SC. That one does not exist. That one is moved to the corner of Middle and Levitt Road. And
Middle Ridge and Levitt to the south here?
yeah, right. See this guy right here?
Yep.
That one is actually moved to this location. So there's this location here, over by the store there, and then one up north.
Okay. And those are going to be not on existing poles, but on poles that you're going to implement or install yourselves?
Correct. Those would be brand new telephone poles, ones we install, and then we place those poles in the right-of-ways, and mount the electricity and the antennas and that kind of thing on it.
Will it be close to existing poles?
Each and every one is a little bit different. They are right in the common easement, so I would say yes. Almost every pole we've set at other locations has been within 20 feet or so of existing poles. So it's not something, just sitting out there by itself. It sits along the pole line, and well, we have to be powered as well. So we look at the easiest, most convenient way to get power to that. So yes, they are usually right in line or offset with existing poles.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think, as you run the lines of the fiber along the existing poles, so the new poles themselves are going to have to be close to our existing lines as well in the right-of-way, correct?
Correct.
So you're going to be doing this project all at the same time?
Yes.
Okay, so just for clarification, even though we are voting on whether or not they can utilize our poles, the entire project is also in place because we have no say on what they're installing.
Clarify, please.
Are you asking whether or not, say it again?
According to Shorty's clarification, what we were voting for, he was saying we were voting for just the implementation of the fiber cable on the actual existing poles, but we're not having any say on these poles going in. Is that correct?
The poles going in or what's going on the poles?
What's my understanding so far is what's going on the poles is going to be brand new poles that they're going to install.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the case or not, whether or not we have any say in that at this point.
Four poles. He's going to-
Yeah, let me,
I'm only putting 4 poles
Right.
in the
I
ground.
understand that.
And then the rest are all attached to Amherst Committee. And all the other cities, we go to Ohio Edison, CEI, CPP, whoever that carrier is. In other cities, we just haven't worked with a city-owned, company.
So the equipment that you're going to install, the antennas and the electric and the electronics involved, that's going to be on our poles?
No,
It's going to be on your
absolutely not.
poles?
That's exclusively
Okay.
our poles. Everything is confined to our poles.
So again, I want to ask for clarification.
and that's that's one of the reasons Mr. Buvak had that discussion at the very beginning and said, I think we need to step back because when we came into this, and when Shorty, myself, the mayor, Mr. Costello met with Mr. Schultz, we were given these 4 poles and their locations. And I don't think that our electric department, Mr. Zabo, has been consulted yet. We haven't got feedback. Correct, Mr. Costello, Mr. Mayor?
That's not true. Mr. Murphy and whether Mr. Zabel was, he was, in fact, Mr. Schultz talked to Mr. Murphy ahead of time. Now, exactly what their conversation was, did you talk to Mr. Murphy regarding these?
Yes, sir, I have, and I showed them examples of what
Okay.
we're looking.
Well, so it's not the case that they haven't talked to our electric department, they have. And so I don't, like I said, I'm not privy to what they and Mr. Murphy and Mr. Schultz talked about, but our electric department has been considered.
All right.
And in the meantime, I would like to meet with them and review any questions or anything that they had, and I could answer any questions they had in the meantime until the next time this is tabled.
Back to my original question, just for clarification, we are voting on whether or not, according to this legislation, to allow fiber optics to be installed like a typical, like we do occasionally, at the contracted rate. This does not have anything to do with the installation of their poles and their antenna stuff. That's correct?
as currently written, I see it the same way, and that would be Mr. Pecora and Mr. Carlson could probably speak to whether we may have to amend this piece of legislation to include the installation of those 4 poles.
We do.
I would agree, I would think we would need to. So before this moves off, if we want to allow this fiber to get from point A around and back out to Lorraine, where it's going by Cooper Foster, it's going to take 4 poles, and that was not what was written into our A-1446. So, Mr. Bukovac, are you looking to amend this then?
I'm looking for clarification, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Joe, if I might, if you read Mr. Schultz's cover letter, which was submitted, you'll see that what they're asking is, and this is verbatim from his original letter, Fiber Optics Technologies Network, Fiber Tech, requests permission to place telecommunication facilities, specific fiber optic cable, on utility poles owned by the city of Amherst. Now, I don't know whether telecommunication facilities means that other stuff or not, but you've got the cover letter in front of you, what they wrote, and what
We're
they're
not installing
requesting.
telecommunications equipment on our poles.
Exactly, and that's where we have the issue with.
I think the meaning on that was basically attachment of the fiber optics to those poles, with the meaning of that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking for clarification.
And I think that's an excellent question. I think it needs to be, according to Mr. Pecora as well, we're going to probably need an amendment that states that these 4 small cells will actually be on 4 poles that will be installed by FiberTech as well. So it's not just hanging fiber on our poles, it's also the installation of 4 poles to make this work. Is that correct, Mr. Schultz? It would take these 4 poles to make this work.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So,
Our only other option would be to mount that exact same equipment on an existing Amherst Committee pole or a Century telephone, which in those situations, we just find it easier to put our own pole in the ground and put all the attachments on it.
Mr. Bukovac, can I have Mr. Pecora maybe answer that, and then we'll come right back to you?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
No, I'm not going to answer that, but all I'll indicate is that, I mean, from our end, I can probably amend the legislation right now here. So
Sure.
we're not, our situation's not going to cause any delay. What
Okay.
you all want to do to investigate things is up to you. The amendment to the actual legislation is instantaneous if you do not act if I want to.
Thank you. Mr. Bukovac, can continue?
Last question I have is the new poles that are coming in, seeing that the lines are, the fiber optic cables are going to be connected on our poles, and I asked earlier about whether or not the proximity of your poles to our existing lines are going to be, do our existing lines have to be attached to your poles? The existing power lines and the such that are stretching between the two?
No, they're not. The placement of these are such that they're offset. You cannot have these antennas, say, up into primary just because of the electrical noise would interfere with it.
Okay.
So what you would do is, say if you had an intersection, you would try to offset that pole in that intersection to keep it away from primary power or, any other dirty power issues like that, just for the better.
So your poles will be totally standalone, your thing, that pole falls over, it's not going to affect any interruption to city services?
No, it
As long as it
shouldn't.
doesn't fall that way. It's going to fall that way.
Well, I mean, there's always something, a tornado pick it up and throw it in the
Understood.
lines or something, but normally, no, absolutely not.
Sharknadoes, I know. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bukovac. Mr. Winarski has questions.
Real briefly,
Yes, sir.
the fiber that's being fed to these poles, does that go back to a switch or a MITSO, or does that work in cooperation with existing cell towers?
That goes back to an existing cell tower. The tower site's the one down there on North Main Street by the police station in the little park. So all these sites in your city would be tying back to that single location, and that's where they would dump onto the switch.
Okay, so this would work in support of existing systems, like a DAX system would. I'm thinking that the repeaters or the support or the augmenting units that you might put in like a large business.
Yeah, exactly. It's just to broaden the range of the cell phones and give them a little bit better reception, that kind of thing. everything, it's all up to date, E911 and all that works on it. They're all pinpointed. Each and every one of them has a GPS unit on it for triangulation and, you know, that kind of thing. Normal FCC specs at each and every location.
Okay, then at the top of the pole, you'd have a battery backup, be it 4 to 6 hours?
The battery backup is actually, would be located about halfway down the pole with the electric stuff in there. And I don't know the exact, I'm guessing it would probably be about 4 hours. It's not like the cable TV backup power supplies with the giant deep cycle batteries. These look like smaller home security type batteries for the battery backup on it. So I'm assuming probably about a 4-hour window on something like that. It may be more, I don't know. I've not worked with any of them as far as how long they would last without power to them. But as long as they have power and they're working, say if you just had a small power outage, the cell service would not be lost.
Okay, and I guess that leads to my question, while we may be voting tonight on simply allowing you to use the the poles, I guess my question to the law directors would be, these sound to be freestanding units that there may be close to what we consider in our ordinances to be a cell tower. Does that require additional legislation or ordinance to permit that beyond what we have here?
I'd have to look and see how big these structures are. If we're just talking about telephone poles, that's one thing. If we're talking about something beyond that, I'd have to want to look at that further.
I just want to understand. I have no problem. Actually, I understand what he's heading toward. I think it's a fantastic idea. We're in desperate need of this in this area here.
Right.
Especially when school lets out. I mean, my goodness,
Exactly.
the footprint shrinks as soon as the kids start texting. When we got 30,000
He's
texts.
got a phone in there.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we take them for
There's
granted
30.
nowadays, but that's the big reasoning on it.
So, with that, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Just, we've got, what you gave me the specs for that you use for the state of Ohio that you approved through there at 30 feet. Sound about right for your,
That would be the height of the antenna.
The height of the antenna.
pole, correct.
so a 30-foot, Mr. Law Director, a 30-foot antenna would be what we're looking at, 30-foot pole.
You don't need to do that.
Mr. Costello, do you know the heights of our current poles right now? I wouldn't either.
Well, the standard telephone pole is exactly what we have. That would be a 35-foot class 3, but 5 foot of it's buried into the ground. So
Okay.
roughly the top of it's 30 foot off the ground.
So we're looking at about the same size, just
Just
looks
about
like a
the same.
telephone pole and little small antenna repeater on it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, the exact same size. I mean, other than your primary poles, which are a little bit bigger, 45 and 60s, but your normal telephone poles are 35, 30.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, Mr. Pecor?
Well, Mr. Kukuka just maybe remembered this, brought it to my attention. Basically, I mean, the legislation we have in place today, all it pertains to is whether or not we're going to grant a license to this company to place its fiber optic and equipment on our poles. So the addition of their own poles doesn't necessarily affect our legislation. We just had to figure out how we needed to achieve that. So I don't know if we need to delay anything as far as amending legislation is concerned. Those other questions, though, the technical questions, that's up to the administration to figure out whether or not we need to delay anything. But as far as the additional 4 poles, they're not our poles. They're going to be
They're our poles,
that you're going to be installing. The legislation and the actual agreement that we reviewed pertains to granting a license for them to put their equipment on our poles. So I'm not sure if we need to really delay anything. I'll talk to Mr. Carlson about whether or not we need additional legislation to allow electrical poles to be placed.
I would defer to the law director, but it would seem to me that, I agree with what Tony said, but that the installation of the 4 poles, first of all, they're putting them into city property.
Exactly.
I think the city has an interest in knowing what they're putting in, how they're constructing it, how they're gonna be anchored. And I would think that they would need a separate permission for that.
Right.
And I think that all of that should be reviewed by city staff, including the building department and the electric department and others. But I agree that this is a kind of a freestanding issue that relates simply to the, as I see the contract, the installation of the equipment on the poles, the existing poles.
Right, so, I mean, I guess what we're saying is, at least, I think I hear you, right, is that we can proceed with this legislation, but we need to consider legislation for full.
I agree, that's my.
Thank you,
If the building.
thank you for the clarification.
That didn't make it any more clear.
So
Well, we
just,
got to the answer anyways.
just to clarify that, Mr. McCord, so we can go ahead and pass this, but if we decide after hearing information that these poles and how they're going to be installed and where they're going to be installed is not up to council's approval, then that could kill the project right there.
Well, remember, we're granting a license to allow them on our existing infrastructure. If we don't like what's gonna happen with these 4 poles, then I'm sure this company's gonna say, well, then there's no point of us utilizing the license, so.
Correct.
I would just hate to delay.
I would like to point out, I know those telephone poles like that are a little unsightly. We do have some other options as far as integrated street lights, you know, the old time gas lantern looking things. We have some like that. So if that were an issue, you know, as far as that telephone pole there, we could look at that one as well.
Right, aesthetically, it looks pretty bad, that's what the council decides. So.
Right.
That's
So
nice.
those are options as well.
But not tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Winarski, for that sidebar there. All right, very good. Are there any more questions on the floor for Mr. Schultz? Mr. Van Schuren, please?
Yeah, really quickly, you may have said this earlier, but this will improve cell phone coverage for all carriers, is that correct? Not just a select few? Or could you clarify?
Currently, this is just going to be going back for one carrier.
Okay,
This is going to be for Verizon.
just Verizon.
Correct. Now, there may be something down the road where other carriers, they're all doing the same thing right now. Sprints, T-Mobs, Verizons, they're all pretty much doing it. This particular one is for Verizon.
All right.
They don't normally let us say their name, but, you know.
Good.
So it would be up to the other carriers to make the decision to approach the city and try to install their own amplification devices in order to cover dead zones, if they wanted to do that. Is that correct?
Well, they could do that, and, you know, they could use any of the carriers, including themselves out here. Like I said, we built Sprint, T-Mobs, for most of the main carriers and stuff, the exact same thing. And if, say, they wanted to do that, they would ride the same attachments and same fiber throughout the city.
Could you use the same ones you would install now for all the rest of them?
Absolutely.
Oh, great.
For a small area here, like, for instance, I'm putting up 24 and 48 count fibers. And out of all those, we're using 8.
All right, that's all I have, thanks.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Van Schuren. Is there anything else we have for Mr. Schultz? Okay, with that being stated, we have a motion on the floor by...
Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Schultz. We have a motion on the floor by Councilwoman Wasilk, seconded by Councilman Goodell, to accept A-1446 and move it on to the floor of council with the emergency clause. And with that, I guess we'll go ahead and move to vote. Pardon me?
With emergency?
With emergency. As
Clarification,
written.
I don't think did you ask originally for emergency?
We talked about it.
I don't think so.
It's proposed with the emergency.
It's proposed ordinance. An ordinance authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to enter into a license agreement with FiberTech Networks for the attachment of fiber optic cables, equipment, and facilities on the city's poles and declaring an emergency. And that, Ms. Wasilk, is how we moved on it, correct? Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and have roll call. Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Van Schuren?
Yes.
Ms. Wasilk?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion passes. Anybody interested? Thank you, Mr. Bukovac.
Move to adjourn, please.
We have a motion to move to adjourn. Mr.
Goodell? Second. There's a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We adjourn at 7:35. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have to open up council and recess council? Yeah.
Council meeting following this? Yes. Oh. Thank goodness.
Thank you.
Very happy to say it, too.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Another committee meeting, council meeting, and recess. Could have just jinxed us. Oh, because the Just be like 9 people late council because you said.
As well, people.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
No, she has to type it up because she has to put these two on.
You would think.
No, no. We're not having council meeting yet. Ready? Okay. November 10th, regular meeting of the Amherst City Council will come to order. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Wasilk.
Here.
Mr. Winarski.
Yeah. Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Janik.
Here.
Mr. Bickerback.
Here.
Mr. Goodell.
Here.
Mr. Van Chern.
We'll stand for a prayer by Chaplain Shilk and remain standing for the pledge of the flag by Sergeant Ernst Bukovac.
We can bow here, please. Gracious God, thank you for the warmth of this calm evening. Bless this meeting tonight and keep us all within your loving care. Guide the thoughts of each of us and guide the hearts of each of us. And now may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to recess council to further committee meetings. Mr. Silk?
Recess.
Mr. Goodell?
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to recess council, so we may go back into committee. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Wasilk.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Janik.
Yes.
Mr. Bickerback.
Yes.
Mr. Goodell.
Yes.
Mr. Van Chern.
Okay, council is in recess. Mr. Silk?
What I can talk about.
Where did you do it?
We'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 7:39 PM on the 10th of November. Attendance has already been taken at the previous meeting. We have one item, A 14-47, resolution accepting amounts and rates determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and approving the alternative method, formula, and allocation of the ULGF and ULGRAF and certifying them to the county auditor. This is requested by Mr. Kukuka. Mr. Kukuka?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. This was, unfortunately, we're a little bit behind. We had to pass this by October 31st, but unfortunately, with the transitions in my office, it's been an oversight on my part. We were okay. We're not going to be dinged or anything like that. All we have to do is accept these and get them certified to the county auditor's office, which I'll take on Wednesday when the office opens, with your passage tonight. So we are asking for your indulgence and pass this on emergency so we can get it to the county and get it certified. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Auditor. Mr. Winarski.
Motion to send this to the floor of council with the emergency.
Mr. Goodell.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to send this to the floor of council with the emergency. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried 7-0. Send it to the floor. Mr. Janik.
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Winarski.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. We are 7-0. And in favor of adjournment, we are adjourned at 7:41 p.m. Thank you.
Okay.
No.
Must be, you went to Canada, they went
Let me check. 4 bars, it's working. Oh, okay. A little higher.
Thinking of the place that
well,
For kids to use for some
We're not gonna have the
arachnophobia
cable.
spiders.
It's just, those are,
Arachnids.
they're just bang things. It would be nice to have a single thing. If he's gonna, something comes up, I'll just.
Russ is up in law director of the zoning department.
Yeah.
Margaret.
These are cell towers, as soon as he said they're fence.
Well, they're as high as,
No nerves in here.
Yeah.
Nothing more than we have right now.
Except laying inside of it. Hit your eye.
I would call it for that,
My son has a tight mouth.
because they're nothing, all there are is,
It's
Can't
just,
go left eye, left and right.
just.
no, they're just a little tight. So you can get, as it gets older, yeah, from like looking at.
They've got some better looking.
Well, what does it mean by
poles that-
tight? Like the nerve is,
No, the one that goes back to your brain, from the back of your eye.
It's crappy, I've seen them,
So when you go
just got a
left and
tube
right,
on.
No, it's just,
You know,
it's just, it's the way that the.
well, no, that was
When he
bad.
was little,
It's got a big can on top, and stuff like
they
that.
don't use that light. They can-
I've seen those. Out
Yeah,
there. Some of them
when I poked him.
They look like,
So he damaged that.
but he's got a better looking pole.
I'd like to see that all over and then split those 4 poles.
well, it's just like in mind. That's why I kept asking the clarification, what they're doing.
Stinks.
Long part fills and out.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know we were putting more poles on.
That's why the clarification, when I wrote that.
They did a nice job.
They had other things in this other tower.
Right, right.
Like they're making up for time lost here.
You know, it's,
Is it our tower?
well, that part, that's the second part.
So it seems to me we have to have something that allows them to put the poles up.
Yeah, I wanted to get separate for them.
Because they're right away, assuming, right?
It's gonna be our right away.
Yeah.
So again, we didn't say they were put poles up, we said they could
We wanted to
put.
be
Just attach them on.
like a, like a license.
It's a rental
License
space.
and so forth, yeah.
Just the abandoned people.
It's rental space to use. I want-
Yeah.
It's only rental space to use the poles.
I got AT&T, I should go in there.
I got, they just switched to Verizon because the Sprint was terrible.
Yes.
That's definitely.
I couldn't make
I had a good spot, here's another thing, in my house, I had a good spot with Verizon, for one reason I got rid of it, so I'm sure trying to make a call.
No,
I go in the backyard.
That's what's
It's the wrong phone, I got no problem.
flip phone.
I can connect anywhere. 8x18, I didn't have that problem, but the poles are put up there, wasn't gonna fix it, so that's why.
Well, when Sprint took down that tower on Quarry,
I was surprised to
That's
see the
why I
governor
don't
run by
cut.
as you did.
and they kept going, oh no, we're upgrading. And finally, I called them, so yeah, we took down the tower.
And you guys want to pick people with driver's license.
See what AT&T or Verizon, after that, forget all about it.
Great, that's why I switched.
Keep as many options though, keep that competition going.
I should do a straight out there.
I thought you,
It's on AT&T's tower.
oh, I didn't.
It's on the middle, so.
You still have $45 a month or something like that?
No, I say keep him in place, bro.
Everybody else taking their time.
I think you should promote it.
Oh, she's right
He writes down word for word.
now. What?
I used to try to do that when I first got on council.
Sorry about the other week.
Man, you missed a good one too, it was
Sure.
a good shot 11.
Yes, sir. Portland,
I don't know.
Colin.
Yeah, so I'm sure you
I already installed in there.
This weekend was a little slow, but we still shot.
It was a little warm this weekend, yeah, isn't it?
No, it's windy, chilly, but
I was really surprised to see Tom lose.
we still
I
shot
really thought.
15 birds.
That's yeah.
But me and you took the spot. We shot 11.
Really good.
11 ducks, the two
I
of
don't
us.
Oh, that's
So
fantastic.
one shorter than one.
What'd you shoot? What
Yeah,
did you shoot?
Burgess
We shot
campaign, didn't
we had a big five for Greenland teal.
With Corey.
Greenland.
Oh, under.
Shot black dog. Like a pintail hen.
Yeah.
A couple of
What
owls.
black ducks? What kind of duck animals?
He did but they're completely different species.
All together, yeah.
They're really different. I mean, they look like a mallard, but they're completely different.
Shoot any wood ducks at all? or no?
One with the
One duck.
So, let me get this straight. You shoot ducks and kill them, right? But you're carving ducks to replace the ones that you're killing?
no, the trash the ones that shoot.
Just see what happens.
Put shoes on my kids.
Restructure.
Feed the babies.
No, I'm teasing.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, hey, you're killing ducks, but you didn't carve them. So technically, you're replacing them.
Luke took a girl this weekend out there. She was somewhat anti-hunting. Yeah. So Luke took her grandpa, he's 81 years old. And then this girl who was a really good friend. She met him and they 300. Now I really understand. The whole process. She was somewhat against the. They went to the hunt. You're not correct. What I'm saying is, she really is having big.
It's almost the holidays, no one's
See,
gonna,
that's
you know,
cool. That's-
everybody's like you.
So she might have to add cost. She
cost.
found out it wasn't all just about. Or she's watching.
Glancing away. Yeah, John Bethany, there
She
was
doesn't have
either.
masks?
But it's
Really
really
didn't.
Yeah.
He knows her. She had said, hey, I'm gonna take this type for a regular council meeting. So. Your coverage.
Ton.
I would just be safe.
Just to be safe. Whatever the hell.
Yeah, two quick subdivisions, you want to enter.
Firms out there,
Yeah.
put on their own.
That's exactly what's in here now.
Where does it come from?
I don't know, I got to it's, I mean, it's interesting.
Tony said.
Well, I got it. Give me all that.
I thought the same thing at first, I thought somebody saying you don't take notes, like, everybody got it.
I know, but
County communications system.
What's that?
Effective meetings.
I won't be here to set it down, so, well,
I got a website for everything.
you can,
Effective news.
I'll be over.
you sure?
Oh, don't.
Well,
I don't wanna,
well, I don't know, I don't know.
Oh,
I'll be on.
Oh, really?
I'll call you.
Okay.
Get me on.
All right.
they're setting up.
I had some of the polls.
Abbreviations I just wanted to throw out there. What do they call them, 50-cent words?
I didn't know where the line was, I didn't know where it was at, I didn't notice that.
So that was nice.
So I guess now that I voted on it, I can't bid on the work, can I?
I don't care.
To maintain, oh, I'm sure you don't.
That information was given to us.
What'd you say?
You can speak a little.
I don't think so. I don't know what.
Thank you, Shorty, I appreciate it.
I couldn't swear that they did.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, I mean, if I do that, you know, they'll call them and say, hey, can you get to that appointment?
Oh, God, I gotta fly to San Diego Thursday. Oh, what a pain in the neck that is.
Just as the weather turns cold.
Turbulent skies. Yeah, it's only 75 during the day, and 65 at night.
You're one of those, huh? All day.
Increasing chance of the 11th.
We're out of here while the getting's good.
I'll call you, let you know what's going on.
I mean, are they going to become our polls?
Chance, 11.
Sales job.
It would be a license.
Right.
They're all.
He sees it as
I'll have full that's going to see tomorrow.
It's just a good way to look at it.
I never check my phone in. So bummed I just
I don't care.
emails and texts.
I mean, even the hard one, she collected down, a couple people at that house very much.
That's
They would do
Call
the
me in
same
San
thing.
Diego.
Well, these new polls,
We'll
we'll grant a license for them to sit on there.
I said, well, you know, we're doing it, you know, let's give it a chance.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
See, other people, yeah.
We made their vote.
I don't drink my.
That's the question I think.
Like 3 times.
Yeah, 'cause you gotta do the AAA.
Those are good things. The last strength of the
Number one
night.
is the worst. You almost spell it out.
Yeah. That missed.
You're gonna
Oh, gosh.
They're worse
See,
than
I
that.
don't know the other question I got.
Who's worse than that? One beer was 16%.
Yeah.
Out that they were telling me.
Now what you do?
Yeah.
My God, two of those.
Honestly, it's like a pencil.
Did the last two guys get the picture of the two polls?
It was.
Oh, they got that Elliot.
I left one.
Whatever it is across the street.
I think we're just going to take it back.
Because I was just,
We'll get
What's
another
the glass of wine?
I'll call
Ten?
them tomorrow.
that's,
Not Tuesday, but we're off tomorrow.
There's some that are 10,
What do you mean you're off tomorrow?
yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yes.
are-
Government employee, think of
He
it.
goes right around.
Yeah.
Veterans Day?
Yeah.
Because a high end beer, I remember malt later, high school, of course, you know, it was like 6.5%.
You gonna be at that
6.5,
veteran
whatever.
celebration tomorrow?
That was a quick trip to
Right
that.
by the-
Which one do I get to
the
choose
murals,
from?
right by the murals downtown here.
Or right here, be
More
Big
creepy.
deal, we're not supposed to have a couple
They want
fans
to put
fly over
cameras
and a
right
speaker and
No, I don't want
a guy
that.
from like News Channel 8.
They can put all the cameras they want. just to have your next day.
Hey Carol, anytime you can add to your workload, just let them know.
To me,
Anytime you can add more stuff to your plate.
20%. It's ridiculous.
Wait till he gets in his car, then we'll get him.
I knew that's Amherst, I didn't know if that would be part of your. It's a pretty big deal, there's usually several hundred people there, some of the schools come out. Generally they have
Hi, Vika, across from the street.
Thank you.
Work happening.
no, file, but like 3 Mustang type airplanes,
Yeah,
like
that's
a
the
military.
P-50, it's supposed to be a P-50.
Oh, they're like- You're a huge star.
Yeah.
That'd be cool though if I did,
They
right?
usually have a wood speaker, you know, somebody that's go to war,
Yeah.
something to talk
How could you
about the war.
He's not the biggest fan as you are.
he is.
Is anybody as big a fan of this?
No,
I don't know, that may be a reach day.
The Force Awakens.
The Force Awakens.
Right,
Oh, what does it
across from
come
Main
out?
Street, building.
One year across from there, but still.
I get that. Those are always fun.
I think it's for kids.
No, it's not. It is, I mean, in the end, it's a kids.
So we got a little tutorial I'm gonna take.
I saw the first one at a drive-in.
Am I turning in bad minutes?
76.
I'm glad.
I love that. I'm reading that last one, right?
We sat in
Yeah, she just gave a
And Sean,
There's transcripts.
What I said was, you know, I'd like to see on the minutes who spoke.
There's two of them.
Right next to each other on the side.
When
When
you
you try to be out here,
questions
people.
on
Agree.
Mr. Goodell,
They're gonna announce it.
Lawrence Kasdan,
Mr. Ventura spoke on. If
Yeah,
anybody
yeah,
wants to
I've heard
know
Cindy,
anything,
but
they
I
can
won't
look
read
at
that.
the minutes.
They said that.
I would have liked the
No,
garden.
they're
They're
gonna
gonna
announce what they're
doing,
doing.
but whatever.
Basically, I just want that for reference.
Oh, really? He did write down what you
You know, to find
Yeah.
out what you want to know. If you get a lawsuit or something.
Script the screen he wrote?
Well, that's his son.
Or he wrote the script? He wrote the book or he wrote, okay, you wrote the script the screen? Or, yeah, okay.
So we want to hear something.
Yeah. He's the one that's in charge.
This is
Right,
a
you can just
title.
title and his
For
son.
an agenda item.
Besides the Empire Strikes Back, that is a clause, okay? The Empire Strikes Back, the Force Awakens. All the rest were not a full clause.
That's pretty
So
nerdy.
may-
I know,
Maybe that
this
will
stuff is getting out of hand.
Can you just pass it around?
Yeah, I was thinking about
No, I'm a fan of like 7 different rumor pages, and I believe Amston.
Chrome storm.
Yeah.
You have your. I'm good.
Okay?
We need a motion to reconvene.
Yeah.
Move to reconvene council.
Oh, just a minute. I have to get the camera going. Mr. Miller,
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Move to reconvene council.
Mr. Mr. Goodell?
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to reconvene council at 7:56. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Council is in session. Move on to item 4, the consent agenda.
Minutes of the regular council meeting held October 27th, 2014. Minutes of the Utilities Committee meeting held November 10th,